All right, so now we have a little bit of our front end done. I want to start working on our back end. Now, the cool thing about Next is it allows us to do our work with the client side and the server side in the same application. And we're going to do this by creating API routes. So an API route, it's an endpoint where we can send a request to get information back. It's not intended to be accessed by users of your application, though it's fine if they do. It's intended to be an internal request. So you make a request from your front end to your back end, and the back end does all the server side processes and sends it back to the front end. So we're going to do that with the app router. We can use this route.js, although we're going to use route.ts, which once again, you could select TypeScript in the documentation for Next.js as well. This is kind of annoying to find actually, because you'll end up finding the page version instead of the app version. But this is the app router version here. So the way that we will create this endpoint is by creating an API folder. I'm looking here, trying to find the API. Here it is. Okay, so this is a good example of a GET request here. So we have this route TS here, or this one's even more simple here. This one's requesting cookies, headers. I want query parameters. I'm just looking ahead a little bit. Query string. Oh, params. No, I don't want the slug. URL query. There it is. Okay, this is perfect. So this is a good starting point here. So I'm going to create inside of source, but outside of app. Or no, sorry, inside of app because it's part of the app router. New folder, API. And then inside of here, I'm going to create another folder called Word. And then inside of that, I'm going to create route.ts. And this is going to be our endpoint here. So if I copy this code, the starter code here, into here, we'll go ahead and leave this out for now. Actually, this out as well. We are going to want to return something. And I like to return JSON. So we'll do this. Let's return JSON like this. And then inside the JSON, we can have a message, hello world, or something like that. So this set up our endpoint here. This tells us the request type, which is GET. We can have post, look, there's a ton of them. Get, head, post, put, delete, patch, options, all these kind of REST API sort of request types. We can do any of those. So for this, we're only going to need GET requests, fortunately. So we'll have it a GET request. And the cool thing about GET requests, that's the default request. So if I make a request to this URL inside of my browser here, localhost 3000/API/word, I get that message, hello world here, in JSON format. Pretty cool. And I can actually get this, I can fetch to this from my front end now. So if I go back to my page.tsx, inside of here, what you'll do is create a new use effect. And this use effect will run, we'll put an empty array here, which means it'll run one time when the component mounts. So essentially the first time it loads, it's going to run this. And then we'll type console log. Actually, let's fetch. So we use fetch in order to get the information. So we'll say fetch, and then we fetch to API/word. So this is a relative path here. By default, it's already get, so we don't have to put anything else in here. And then we'll type, now this returns a promise. So a promise means that it's not going to be fulfilled it's not going to run initially. So we have to do something when it fulfills. So the way we do that is with .then. And then .then, this will be the response. So we pass in another handler function. This represents the response coming in. And then we have to do something with that response. And we want to get the JSON data from the response. So we'll say response.json. And this also returns a promise. So we have to do another .then. And then finally, this is our data that comes through. And we simply console log that data. So now if I go back to our main page here and we run this, it says undefined. Did not make the request. Let's try that again. I'm looking for the fetch to word. There's the response. I did something wrong here. Let's try that again. It is returning the content. I'm just handling it wrong. Oh, I think it's this one shouldn't be wrapped. There we go. Yeah, I get mixed up with the wrapping. I think that should fix it. That did fix it. Okay, so what was happening is if I wrap this in curly braces, which sometimes I naturally do, then we have to implicitly state this is a return here, I believe. So if I do this, it will still work just fine. It's just an implied return if you leave the curly braces off. So this is an implied return here. Okay, so let's create another const response, set response, and we'll say use state string like that. Once again, actually in this case we want it to be undefined. When it's something like this, we set it to undefined by default and then update it based on that. So now instead of console log, what we're going to do is we will say set response to data. But we don't want it to be data. We want it to be the message from the data because we used message. So we'll type data.message, which will grab this hello world out of here. And now if I go down here and let's use typography so we're staying in line with MUI stuff. Oh, MUI typography right there. And then we'll say typography variant equals h3, something like that. And then inside of here, we're going to put our response, but it's gonna be undefined at first. So we're gonna use a null check like this, I believe. I think this is also an undefined check. And we're gonna put a placeholder instead. So I think that should work. There we go, hello world. Now, if I type like loading in here or something, then when I refresh, you'll see loading until it takes time for that initial request to happen. Loading, there we go. It's kind of huge, okay. So essentially, we're making a request from our client side. Remember, we're on the client side here to our own internal API, and it's returning a message. The other thing we can do here is we can actually pass in a query string. So what we'll do is we're going to expect a query called word. So we're going to be getting word. And then we're going to return your word is plus word, plus word, query, like that. Okay. Now when I run this, it's going to say your word is null because nothing was passed in. So what we need to do is we can update this to a query string here. And we'll do that. We need to add, let's test this here. We're going to say, so we use question mark, and then we say word equals test, like that. Refresh, your word is test. Hi, your word is hi. Very cool. So in the next one, we're actually going to pass in this word here so that when we submit it, it's going to update how the request is sent and then how the response comes back.